Good evening, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here. The Little Haiti Revitalization Trust hosts an open house every first Wednesday of the month. This month, we're focused on real estate, and we have a distinguished panel here that I'm so thankful that are here to be able to give us some insights and inspire you to come back home. Like I like to tell people, to invest in Little Haiti. Our goal and mission at the Trust is always to uplift and revitalize and preserve the culture of Little Haiti while being part of the development that we see all around us. So we hope today that you get some good nuggets of information, you get inspired, and that you can be part of the development that's happening here in Little Haiti. I would like to introduce our moderator, Chad Musgrove. He is a senior vice president at M&T Realty Capital Corporation since June 2022, focusing on multifamily affordable and conventional loans nationwide. Based in Miami, he provides structured finance solutions via capital markets for non-multifamily commercial real estate. Mr. Musgrove has directly been involved in structuring more than $3 billion in loans throughout his career. He is a sitting board member of Rebuilding Together Miami-Dade and the Real Estate Lenders Association of Miami, and volunteers for various nonprofit organizations such as Omega Psi Phi Fraternity and 100 Black Men. So please, let's give him a warm welcome.
Thank you so much.
Our next speaker is Mandy Bartel. She is a proven leader with the South Florida Community Land Trust. She is a proven leader with a track record of delivering impactful solutions in housing, economic development, and community-focused planning. Mandy spearheaded efforts to address South Florida's housing challenges by organizing the region's first housing conference, county-wide housing needs assessment, and coalition of businesses, community groups, and government partners. These efforts led to the creation of the South Florida Community Land Trust, where Mandy has served as the founding executive director and now CEO since 2010. Let's welcome Mandy.
Thank you, guys.
Next, we have Darren Brown, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Darmac Builders. For over 24 years, Darren has been the CEO of Darmac. Darren is an award-winning builder and licensed certified building contractor, licensed real estate associate broker, and LEED certified. He has participated in various construction projects, including Southwest Airlines Terminal 1 at the Hollywood-Fort Lauderdale Airport, and affordable housing projects for Broward County and the city of Fort Lauderdale. Welcome.
Thank you.
And our last speaker, I learned this week, his first name is pronounced Govine, but I am going to need some assistance with your last name.
Srivastav, Govin Srivastav.
Govin Srivastav. And he is with Miami Homes for All, where he is the Director of Capital Solutions. Govine is working to address the affordability crisis by supporting the creation and preservation of deeply affordable housing across Miami-Dade County. He holds an MBA with a concentration in finance and economics from the University of Chicago. Please welcome him. Thank you, and with that, I'm going to turn that over to Chad.
Or feel free to pick it up. Don't worry about it. I like to make these events, very friendly, more of a fireside chat. I want to encourage you to ask questions. No question is a stupid question because we all had to start in this space somewhere. And you have a panel here of distinguished guests who've been doing this for a long time, who have a wealth of knowledge, who have many battle scars and still, as we were just talking about, in the lobby. So thank you. Thank you for being here with that. And so I want to start off and just, kind of set the stage a little bit. Mandy and Govin and Darren, I think what we're seeing right now in the capital markets is a huge shift, right? We have been in a low interest rate environment for a long time. I think you have I won't say a generation, but you have a crop of developers who've seen mainly just an upshoot, right? An upswing in the market. And now as we're experiencing a downturn or a slowdown or stagflation or whatever you want to call it, I think you're starting to see a lot of people who have to really figure out how to get projects done. And I think that's where your expertise comes in and your skills and, the knowledge that you've attained over the years will then allow you to be successful. So, we'll start out a little broad, a little more general, and then kind of delve in. And so, as Joanne alluded to, so in my background, all of that fancy stuff you heard on paper, it's an easy way to say that basically I give out loans mainly for multifamily housing. I work in all aspects of the business, all things heads and beds. So that's affordable housing, that's market rate housing, that's senior living, that's manufactured housing. So to distinguish on the commercial side is what we consider to be 5 units plus, and on the residential side, 1 to 4 units. So while I don't play as much in that space, I do have a lot of contacts in that space and still do a lot of business there personally. And even personally invest myself there. So happy to answer all the questions we can. And so what I was talking about with setting the stage is that you're seeing a huge shift where a lot of developers and owners and operators started projects and they looked nothing like they did before. So I want to start out with just kind of, the general question of kind of talking about, how do you identify a site that you want to take a look at? And, starting with the process, what do you do once you've identified that site? Who are you talking to, right? Is it your engineers? Is it your attorney, or are you working with, Durham, all the things you have to do to develop real estate. So I kind of want to just throw it out there. I don't know who wants to take the first one or just kind of generally talk about it. But let's just kind of talk about, how you identify, an investment, what makes a sound investment, and why would you choose to pursue that? So who's first up and wants to take that one?
All right, I'll kick off. So just a little bit about the organization. The South Florida Community Land Trust, we're a nonprofit developer. We were founded nearly 20 years ago with the core belief that people living in and working in our community should be able to afford to live and work in our community. So we build new, we renovate existing, we do rental housing, we do home ownership. But one thing that remains consistent is we always put the land in the land trust as a way to protect the affordability for future generations. So I'll share a little bit about what we've done to analyze some sites. So we started off, we cover a big area covering South Florida. It's bigger than, I've talked to some colleagues nationally, it's bigger than some that cover an entire state. If you're talking in Delaware, Rhode Island, it's a very large metropolitan area. So we took the approach a couple years ago of turning to mapping things. So we did our first run of looking at what opportunities are out there in the market, but also what would build opportunity for residents. So we asked our residents, we asked some community partners, and the basic question of what would improve the lives of the residents we're serving. And we heard a lot of things like living near transit, living near the jobs, living near good schools. So we also and other problems. And when we came back to those community groups, they said, well, have you thought about climate change? And in the first round, because this is 2016, no one was really talking about that. But we decided to go back and do another iteration, and in the next version, we added sea level rise. And, I one of the areas that has the highest ground here in South Florida, albeit not all that high. But, as we're starting to see not just sea level rise, changes, patterns, more rain, how that condition. And then we started to look at where are the actual opportunities to invest. So we overlaid it, land owned by nonprofits. And then we thought, well, where's the money going to come from? Kind of circle and hone in on areas near transit. It's a very methodological approach, right? But then we needed money. so
A little bit important.
So we'll get to that next. But for those of you who don't want to go through all those steps, there are some sources here in the city of Miami. If you haven't seen it before, Gridix is a good source because if you don't have an architect, if you don't know how to read codes and zoning, it's like a cheat sheet. You type in the address of something you're looking for, and it will tell you what you can build in that neighborhood, what you can build as of right, whether it's a commercial project, residential, whether it's multifamily, single family, the height, the number of units. So I would say that would be a good cheat sheet for someone that likes maps, but maybe doesn't want to go through the whole methodological process that we went through.
That's awesome. That's great. So let's break that down a little bit, and I'll come to your question in a second. Give me 1 second. So let's break that down a little bit, right? So we talked about site selection. We talked about overlaying with transit. We talked about overlaying with potential financing. We talked about overlaying with the schools and the local resources. So, Mandy, one of the important things, right, in affordable housing, when we look at deals, we look at scoring those deals in the beginning. And so I want you to just kind of delve in a little bit, too, from the affordable housing standpoint, because what I want the audience to get out of this is that just because you're an individual, just because maybe grandma, auntie had a site and you've never developed a project before, that should not stop you from potentially pursuing a development site, because one of the good things in this business is about having educated partners. So just kind of talk to us when you're looking at these affordable deals, and the things that you're overlaying, the powers that be who are providing this financing, what do they want you to have? Is it bus stops? Is it, grocery? What do they want to see in a development that's going to provide those services for the community and for the resident living at that property within the community as well?
Yeah, that's a good point. Because if you're doing affordable housing, you're not just going to the bank to get a loan. You're going to get dollars from local government, from the state, from different federal programs, and a lot of times they do have different scoring criteria. So you get a leg up a lot of times being in a transit area or transit zone, being close to these other resources, particularly if you're looking at larger projects that are funded by tax credits. Those are actually key to scoring your project and getting them funded. But you even see those in some of the county's programs and their surtax program for funding. There are priorities, there are scoring criteria. And a lot of times at the end of the day, every point counts, and that becomes the difference between getting funding or not getting funding.
Absolutely, absolutely. So let's move it down the line a little bit. So Darren, I wanna bring you a conversation to piggyback off of this a little bit, right? Because now Mandy has worked to select the site. She thinks that this is a great place to build. She scored it. She's looked at it. So her next step, she's probably going to start talking to environmental partners, start talking to various players. But at some point, she's got to come to the GC and say, hey, I need to get some numbers to make sure the numbers work, because when I go talk to individuals like myself at the bank, I'm going to say, hey, Mandy, that's great. The project sounds great. I think the community's going to like it, but how are you going to pay me back? So, Darren, when someone's coming to you and, you're looking at this project, what do you think are the steps that maybe they should have taken, or what are the steps that you take when you're conducting your due diligence, right? Because at the same time, you're interviewing the sponsor to see if you want to work with them and that they know what they're doing, and or that they're going to trust in what you're doing as the GC to be able to deliver for them. So talk to us a little bit, well, first give us a little background on, yourself and what you're doing, but then I want you to segue that into, as the due diligence process goes, how do you get involved?
Thank you. Here's the thing. I want to start out saying who I am. I'm Darren Brown with Darmac Builders. Before I got into construction, I was in banking. So the knowledge process for me as far as how to put a package together helped me tremendously to become a contractor, because I kind of like knew all the nuances about how to put the deal together. So one thing when I hear affordable, housing, I automatically think financing, because it has nothing to do with material costs, because plywood doesn't know where it's going. Block doesn't know where it's going. Concrete doesn't know where it's going. If you go to Home Depot and buy a sheet of plywood, you don't know where it's going. It could be going on the ocean. It could be going in. When I in my possession, I always meet value engineering. It's very important, because there's different ways of cooking an egg, right? So if I'm looking at the plans and I'm saying that maybe without losing the structural integrity of the building, I say, can we do it this way? So I have conversations with structural engineers and things of that nature to try to reduce the cost in that regard, okay? So if I'm building a house that has like 5 steel columns, is that really necessary? Okay? Because sometimes you got to remember, I'm not taking anything from structural engineer. If you're here, I apologize. But, okay, but when I'm out in the field, these things cost, and you can't get around it, right? So I try to come in with the antennas up and say, okay, this is what it's going to be based on if we do it this way. However, if we can have a conversation with the structural engineer and not change, the house still going to look the same. It's still going to have the structural interior, because everything got to be done by Florida Building Code. It's not like we cutting corners. Okay, I want to be crystal clear on that. But I want to speak with that structural engineer, so then it's like, oh, yeah, we can do that. We can put that tie beam in there instead of putting that steel column there. We can do something like that. And I'm not saying it's going to reduce it tremendously, but it will have some effect on the bottom line cost, So I kind of like, when I'm looking for projects for in the private sector, and you touched on it, which is brilliant. One of the things that I see that developers come across, I'm usually third in line, okay? Because I get people say, well, can you tell me how much it costs? And I'm like, how can I give you a price on something that I haven't seen, right? And this is always going to be my go-to statement. I say, because if I give you a price, we're going to have I thought you said conversation. And I do not want to have that thought you said conversation, because if we do that, I'm already out of the contest, right? Because I gave them a number that is not true, right? So I don't fall into those traps. So what happens when you go looking at property, one time, this is a true story. You can look at the zoning and say something in zone REM 25. You go by, and first know what that means, okay? Look it up. And you mentioned a term that I got to get from you, because you said you can look up
Gridix.
Gridix, yeah, I
Yep.
got to write that down.
Yep.
Because what ended up happening, by you not knowing, you find a lot that's in a REM 25, and usually that's like 25 units per acre, because everything's based on an acre. But this lot is not an acre. And a person went out and purchased it thinking they can get 25 units on a 8,000 square foot lot, because it said REM 25. You see what I'm saying? So now you trapped, because you didn't educate yourself enough. You just saw the 25 thinking that you can, but you can't. So that name the man gave you, please write that one down. So if you find a lot, do your research on it. Find out how many units you can get on it. If it's unclear, call the city, call the zoning, have a conversation with the people in that department and say, hey, I got this lot. It's this many square foot. What can I build on it? Don't guess. Please don't guess.
Beautiful, beautiful. And so, so what I hope you also got out of that as well is what you don't know, ask the question. Call the experts, reach out to people, have conversations. Like you said, call the city, call someone like Amanda who's working in the market. Look, most developers and GCs will tell you, hey, I'm too busy maybe to work on your project, but call this person. Or I've worked on a project similar to this. These may be some of the pitfalls that you're going to experience. So having those resources are critical. And so I want to go down to Govan as well too. So I want you to give the audience some background on Miami Homes for All. Right? Love the name. Everyone should have a home, should have a place to be. So, kind of tell them about, who you guys are, what are the program and services you offer, and then kind of dovetail that for us, into this real estate business that we're talking about, from site selection to putting together a team to finding a GC, and where does Miami Homes for All come in that process in the beginning?
Yeah, for sure. So Miami Homes for All has been around for 40 years, and for the first around 30 years of it has always been focused on advocacy. And so at policy level, how do we create government programs and policy that is really supporting affordability here in Miami? And so originally, we were tasked with really preventing homelessness and working with homeless communities to get them into affordable housing. Over like 30, 40 years, we advocated for things like the surtax program and food and beverage tax. And eventually, around 10 years ago, we realized that, okay, there's this role for policy and there's a role for advocacy, but there's a lot of other gaps in the system, and how do we fill those in? And so, just really quick, like we have a couple different programs. One is our Youth Homelessness Initiative, and that's connecting youth and families, so folks under 24 years old or families, to homes out of shelter and off of the street. We also have like a youth advocacy coalition as well. So that's our Youth Homelessness Initiative. From the other side, in the affordable housing space, we realized, okay, there's this huge gap. So we started with research. We saw that we did some research. There was 90K, there's a gap of 90,000 homes for folks making $75,000 or less. And when you drop down to around 50% AMI, which is, I think it's around 45K right now, you get a gap of 130,000 homes in Miami-Dade County. And so for us as an advocacy organization, it's like, okay, we can continue advocating, but what are we going to do now to start closing that gap? And so we have our kind of policy work, but then where I kind of fit in and the programs that I'm running fit in are trying to kind of close that gap by supporting developers. And so that's why I'm here today as well, right? We want to be able to support developers who are working on deeply affordable housing. And so that's not, right? There's 120% AMI, there's 100% AMI, but we're saying like deeply affordable for us is 80% AMI or less. And ideally, right, with some mix for 50% AMI. And that's for rentals. Like for home ownership, we know it's a little bit different, looking at around 120% AMI and below for home ownership. But that's really the work that we're tasked with, and our work really comes from this deep research, similar to kind of how Mandy approached it, is that there's a need and how do we fill it. And so we have two programs now that are working to fill these gaps. One, I'll talk real quick, is our Funders Collaborative, and that's starting up in the fall. And that's for folks who, have a project, have site control, or are moving through the development process, but have some sort of funding gap and want to be able to access funding. And so what we're doing is, from our end, we're working with public sector, private sector, philanthropy, to get folks in the same room and talking to each other, and then to share what we know about what developers need, to make sure that they understand the type of products that affordable housing development need right now. And then what we're doing is connecting funders to developers. And so in this Funders Collaborative program, we're going to have pipeline review committee. Developers will be able to go and pitch their projects to funders. And it's not going to be like Shark Tank, where someone's saying, hey, like, take the money right now, and you're good, like, I'm all in. We love that. Maybe if you're down.
I like to write checks. I don't know, I like to write checks.
But the goal is to really start these funding relationships. And so we have like an application process you go through our application, we create a packet, we send it to different funders who think will be a good fit. They're all in the same room with you as a developer, and then you're kind of pitching your project to these funders, and that's the start of a funding relationship. And so really, that's going to be launching in September, and we're going to try to get it moving, like a couple folks presenting to funders every month. And those are, and again, like we're thinking about like we're in the development process, that's like a little bit further down, right, in the process where you got some money, you got a pro forma, you're feeling ready to really make this pitch to folks. But then, if we kind of step it back to more towards your question, it's like earlier on the development process, we also have programs to support developers there as well. And so we had a program called Connecting Communities to Capital, 3Cs, which was all about working with smaller scale projects and emerging developers. And so Mandy actually was part of that cohort, and as a developer with much more, like probably on one end of the experience, right? Like one of the range of experience, but really we were focused on working in communities like Little Haiti, Overtown, Wynwood, that are experiencing gentrification and displacement, and supporting smaller scale and emerging developers to be able to move through the development process. And so that looked like really high touch, like technical assistance. So folks like working one-on-one with our technical assistance provider to kind of go through the pre-development phase, like get all your assessments done. You know, our person like worked on, you know, design, architecture, you know, pro forma, getting funding, like really like high touch and really trying to help folks move through the process. And it's been really successful and exciting, and we've seen a lot of work there. And now as we look to the future, we're trying to think about how do we kind of expand these programs, right? 10 projects was awesome. We want to work with more. We're a nonprofit. We can't put like that same resource for every single project. So now we're working on expanding those programs. How do we help folks get like mentor-mentee relationships so that they can move through the development process? How to help them access, how to help y'all kind of develop pro formas and access funding. Really like we're working towards that, and so that'll be kind of more in 2026. And so I know I went on a whole tangent, but to answer your question real quick, affordability is our number one priority, right? Like we want to work with developers who care about providing affordable units, but then also like as I mentioned, like these smaller scale like emerging developers and property owners are folks we want to work with because we really care about a connection to the community. We know that, right? If you live in Little Haiti, you're working in Little Haiti, right? Like you're accountable to Little Haiti. Like you want, you know, you're seeing the people that are living in your homes. You want to provide housing that's good and safe and affordable for those people. And so for us, like that's really important, that community connection. And, you know, that can come in the form of community benefits agreements. It can come in the form of just being a part of the community and designing, you know, your homes based off of the needs that you're seeing from the folks that you're meeting. But that's another thing that's really important to us as a nonprofit.
Yeah. So you touched on a lot there, Govan. Like I hope you guys have taken notes. Like that was a very impactful piece right there. So, you know, let's kind of take a step back and unpack that a little bit, right, for the audience. And then, you know, I want to, before we kind of go into some of the next question, you know, the next kind of phase, I'll take a couple questions. Sorry, your hand was up, but so I want to unpack that a little bit for the people in the room. So, how many of you in this room, just by a show of hands, are familiar with AMIs? When you heard him talking about AMI levels. So let's see a couple hands. 1, 2, 3, 4. So we got 4 or 5 people in here familiar with AMI. So I think it's really important to kind of talk about that, right? And what AMI actually stands for. So AMI is the area median income. And so what Govan was talking about was basically what people are earning in the community. And essentially what we look a lot at affordable housing is based on your earning power is what you should be paying for rent. Now, I want you to think about what some of you are either paying for a rent or a mortgage, and by definition, an affordable rent or mortgage should be 30% of your income. Exactly. So think about that. And the reason why I bring it up is important. So for instance, like for me, I went to school in New York. So when I graduated, I can remember my first paycheck of the month and that second paycheck on the 15th, it was the first paycheck going all to rent and it was half of the second check going all to rent. living in New York. So I bring that up because that's very important to understand, how some of these projects work, and the piece that Mandy touched on earlier, why some of these other subsidies and funding are very important to your project. Now, Govan also touched on another piece, talking about the advocacy and helping you put together pro formas. So one of the things that's always my goal coming out of this is that you see folks like Mandy and Darren and Govan and know that you have resources within the community to talk about. So don't be afraid to talk about a project or a lot you see if you don't understand what the code means and what it means to change the code. Because if you're going to come into this business, I think what everyone on this stage can say is that you're going to have to understand the cost that it takes for you to advance a project to get to the point to where you're talking to a Mandy or talking to a Darren. So being able to work with someone like a Govan who can say, hey, okay, yeah, let's go back. Mandy said we should go to this program. Let's map this. Let's understand what the potential costs may be to even develop this project and see if it's going to be feasible for you to then start down that path. So I wanted to kind of unpack a couple things that he said that I think that's very important in the process, because I think a couple of us have probably been there where someone's jumped into a project and you take one look at it and you say, guys, these numbers don't work. And therefore your project is not going to work, and you spent a lot of money. And I can tell you right now, which I'm sure that the folks up here will agree, if the numbers don't work on that project, you got to let it go. I got 3 small kids and we listen to let it go. You gotta let it go, because it's not gonna work. So I want to take a couple questions and then go to the next segment. And Joanne, you keep me straight on time because you know how I roll. But I know you had a question here in the front, so I want to be sure to give an opportunity because you got it. Okay, thank you. I want to be able to give an opportunity because I want you to be able to ask a question that other folks may be thinking of.
She said GridX, and I heard GridX, so I was going to ask if you could support with the definition, the spelling of the resource you're offering.
GRIDICS. I'm not sure that every city is entered in there, but I know a lot of cities, including the city of Miami, has all of their zoning information uploaded on there.
Okay.
The other thing is I think you might have to pay for this, but it can even do like a 3D massing. So it's just a blob, but to show you the height, the density, the square footage that could go on the site as well.
Thank you. And my question for you is, how much experience does somebody have to get started? I've never developed anything other than, putting myself together.
You're here right now. That's the first
I mean,
step.
I have some real estate and interior design background, but I'm excited about the idea of developing. And like I tell him, I'm like, but I don't know where to start. And ChatGPT can only take me so far. It'll tell me what to do, and I still don't know what to do. So how much experience? And then, like, from your perspective, to show up at your Miami Homes for All, and then to show up to you and be like, hey, I've never done this. Give me money. How does that work?
Right. I mean, so we really do want to work with folks who don't have experience or who have experience and are really interested in affordable, or maybe they're a nonprofit who are moving into affordable. So really, yeah, like you're asking the right question. I think for us, like in terms of getting started, it's those steps, right? Like you got to tap into your community and see who's out there. So reach out to me, reach out to folks who know this work, understand who's out there and can provide support. For us, like a developer is anyone, right? Like I say developer very liberally, but it's if you're a property owner who wants to, preserve your property, or maybe you have a couple of units, right? You're we say you're a developer because we want you to know that you can access the same, capital, the same money, the programming that we're offering and other people have out there. So first step is, call yourself a developer, start talking to people, learn what resources are out there. Like for us, like we're really thinking, as I mentioned, about how do we kind of expand our support. A lot of it is going to be, I think, looking for helping folks connect with more experienced developers, because a lot of times, unfortunately, right, you go in for financing, like it's hard to access the money if you don't have an experienced person on your team or working in maybe a joint venture with a co-developer. So that's one thing to think about, thinking about even just like mentor-mentee relationship, who's out there in the community that can provide you support. And then, yeah, like, then it's all about like figuring out the numbers. Like for us, like we really try to work with folks who have like either have a property and are preserving it, or have some sort of site control on a property, right? Because there's a lot of work to be done after that, but there's a whole lot of work to be done before that too. But we want to help people get to that place as well. So, and in terms of the financing, I can probably kick it over.
Yeah, look, I will be brutally honest and say for me on the financing side, so it depends on who you're talking to for financing. So there are various organizations for developers at different levels, and I work with a myriad of them, right? Today I was, talking to a gentleman who's been a GC for a long time who now wants to start develop. He's got a 22-unit building that he's been working with the county on that, they're probably going to convey to him. It's a vacant shell. But at the same time, he hasn't been a sponsor who signed on a deal. So the first thing I said to him was, well, we've got a couple of options. To come to an institution like me, so I work for the 15th largest bank in the country. Typically, we're working with the more seasoned and experienced developers who are doing, Fannie, Freddie, HUD, kind of this large-scale development finance. But again, that's where community banks are for. That's where credit unions are for. There's private capital, and then there's nonprofit institutions. There's great groups. If you're not familiar with, I would encourage everyone in this room to do some research on a group by the name of LISC, which is Local Initiative Support Coalition. I would tell you to look up another group called LIFT, which is the Low Income Investment Fund. And there's probably others that I'm forgetting, but these are institutions that are designed in, CDFIs who work with individuals who are, some who are just starting out, some who have a little more experience. And then, like I said, typically when you kind of get to, where I work is typically, your more seasoned and institutional investors. Think about like your Relateds or your housing trust groups or your community land trusts who've done this multiples of times. But what I say to that is don't be, discouraged. Ask the questions, because more often than not, if you approach someone in the business and say, hey, look, I don't want to take a lot of your time. I need 15, 20, 30 minutes. Come with detailed questions with what you want to ask, what you want to understand, or what you want to explore, and ask for direction. And I'd say more often than not, if you come to that person in that manner, they will make the time and have a conversation with you. And what you'll find is that conversation will actually run longer, because they're going to be impressed that you just can't, you didn't just come and say, hey, tell me what you do and tell me about this. But you came very targeted and direct, because at the end of the day, we all, the most precious thing that we all have is time. And so that's how I would answer that question. But
You said CDFI. What is that?
Community Development Financial Institution. So typically CDFIs are raising money from philanthropic entities, from other banks, et cetera, and they get capital specifically to invest in, areas that are gentrifying or, low-income areas based on a certain census tract, et cetera. And look, the other thing I'll say too is that, gentrification it's a very difficult word, right? We struggle with it. But one thing that I can definitely say, and I think the folks up here will agree, that the best way to have the mitigation of gentrification is through participation in the transformation. So I'll say that again. The best way to have the mitigation of gentrification is through participation in the transformation. Right? Because just like what Little Haiti Revitalization Trust is doing, just like what South Florida Community Land Trust is doing, they are activating and going into the community to say, look, we're happy to have you come in and develop, but you're going to partner with us. We're putting these deals into the land trust. We want to ensure long-term affordability. And if you don't like that, then that's okay. There's another developer that does that, and that's their mission, and that's what they do. So, the research is always important. But with that, though, those were some great questions, and thank you so much. But I kind of want to transition to the next stage, because that was I think a great segue to kind of talk about, the inexperienced developer to the experienced developer. So for kind of the next set of questions with the panel, I want to kind of talk about, the pitfalls and the challenges, right? And the things that we've experienced. So kind of talk to me, about, what are some of the unique opportunities, and challenges that you see. Govon, I'll throw that to you. Mandy, maybe think about, how landowners can work with you and those challenges that you encounter. And Darren, I would love for you to kind of bring it home and talk about, those same challenges and how they show up into the budget in two words that I know a lot of developers don't like to hear, i.e. the change orders. But, talk about how that relates to that. So, Govin, I want to start with you, kind of talking about, some of the challenges that you see. And then, Mandy, I want you to go in second, and Darren, bring it home.
All right. Yeah, you could talk a lot about challenges for a long time, but there's a lot of opportunities too, so don't forget that. Don't just get discouraged. But, one thing that comes to mind, like from just our conversation, is financing. And that can mean a lot of things, right? So, for one thing we saw, especially with folks who are kind of entering into the game for the first time or emerging developers, we saw this really big difference between large-scale developers and smaller scale in the pre-development phase, because large-scale folks have these kind of cash reserves that they're able to spend up front. And to even get started, you have to do environmental assessments, structural assessments, a variety of different things to like work on your design and even just get into the next phase of development. And so that costs money. And so with our first cohort of folks, we were lucky enough to have like some money from JP Morgan Chase, which was really flexible.
Wow.
And we were able to give out pre-development grants to folks. And that we realized was incredibly important to help people move through the development process, because it could be, and we structured it really flexibly so you could use it for a variety of different things to get through that phase.
And Govon, I'm sorry, I want you to keep that thought, but I want to step in right here so you really understand the impact and the importance of what he's talking about with the pre-development dollars. Because any developer will tell you that is part of the make it and break it stage. So what he's talking about is when you come in and find a site, and Mandy, you tell me if I'm wrong from developer perspective, does this site have environmental issues? Do we need to bring in fill to raise the site out of a floodplain? These are the dollars that you have to spend before you even get to the point sometimes to approach a Mandy, to approach a Darren. So we're talking about, in some instances, hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Oh, wow.
That you need to be able to come up with, where third-party reports, $3,000-$5,000 for a PCA, ESA environmental, service report, or a phase 2 if there's other issues. So I'm sorry, I didn't want to cut you off there, Govon, but I want you to really understand that these are monies that you're putting out before you even know that this deal is at a point where it's ready to develop, which is why it's very important to talk to people and understand, and knowing what the community wants and knowing where the funding is going to be for these types of projects. But I'm sorry, continue.
Yeah, no, exactly. That's perfect, like kind of color to that picture there, because it is so important. And we saw that phase is really, really important. So knowing that up front, right, knowing that that's going to be a hurdle or a challenge from the beginning is important to know, and trying to figure out what resources are out there to get you through, whether it's, if you can find it, get lucky and find a nonprofit which has a grant, that's great. There are like these community development financial institutions. I was just talking to Raza Development Fund, and they were telling me they have a pre-development loan product, which is great because it's pretty patient, right? And you can pay it back once you're starting to get some more cash flow, or you're able to kind of move into the construction project and get other financing in. So that pre-development financing is something I really stress, even throughout the kind of development process. Being able to access that capital is something that we've seen as a challenge, that flexible capital. If something comes up, right, even if a funder promises you money in one phase and you're in this phase and something, like you're in an earlier phase and something comes up, you got to address it before you can access that next pool of money. And that's been a huge challenge. And so finding that kind of bridge bridge capital has been a big challenge that we've seen. And then, yeah, just generally in the financing side, again, like gaining that trust from funders and getting that money through the door, even if you have a great project, is hard. And so, I mean, that's, again, a lot of our work, right, with the Funders Collaborative is try to build that trust and vouch for folks. And then just one other kind of challenge that comes up that I'll just mention quick is just thinking about getting like the right contractors and the right folks for your project, because, you know, I mean, like, you can get a neurosurgeon to put a Band-Aid on, but that's going to be real expensive. Right? You don't want to do that if you have a smaller project and you get like the full Rolls Royce, like that'll cost you a lot of money, right? So thinking about what's your project, what are the real needs that you have, legal, you know, contractors, architects, designers, and then, you know, finding the right people for that project, I think is really critical.
Beautiful.
So just wanted to call that out as well.
And so Manny, I want to pivot to you. So I want you to kind of expound on that a little bit, you know, as you talk about, you know, how folks can work with, you know, your organization, but then dovetailing with what you see with those pre-development costs, and, you know, maybe you have experience with a deal that came in and it wasn't the most efficient design and maybe they had to redevelop it, but kind of talk about how folks can work with you and then, you know, dovetail with those challenges that you see as well too.
So you want me to tell you how I got my scars?
A little bit. Don't scare them too badly now, but we don't want to run them away from
Well,
you.
I think,
Yes.
you know, I'll kind of start with the last part, which is, you know, you heard a little bit about it, but it's know what you're going to buy, right? So you heard earlier, make sure you know what the zoning is, what you can actually build on the site. But if you're buying an existing building as well, you need to do your due diligence, right? I don't know if any of you bought anything before, bought your own home. Spend the money on the inspections. Spend the money now to save later, right? So you're doing your environmental site assessments. If it's an existing building, check for lead, check for asbestos, check for Chinese drywall. Have a roofing contractor come out and do an inspection, tell you how much life is left on the roof. Look at the electrical. You know, go beyond just that 4-point basic inspection required for insurance. I can tell you one that we've learned more than once. It should have been a fool me once, right? Camera the plumbing lines, okay? We've had this happen more than once. You know, the second time, I was like, oh, there was just a recent plumbing permit pulled. We're fine. But I can tell you that's a big, big project, especially if the unit's occupied and you got to go in and run new plumbing lines. Sometimes you got to dig up the floors. Sometimes you can go in from the outside, but you got to turn the water off. So certainly that is one of the lessons learned. And in worst case, if you have to walk, you find a problem that's too big, too expensive, don't feel like you wasted the money. Think of it that you saved the money, right? You saved tens of thousands of dollars in that, and possibly bankruptcy, right? If the project goes really offline. So spend the money up front for sure. And then just kind of tying into, I think, your question earlier, you know, I think if you're interested in real estate development and you're just starting out, there's really good training programs. This is obviously a first step, but LISC does some, Enterprise Community Partners has some great ones. Grow America, I think that's what they changed their name to. Grow America has a really strong, if you want to learn how to do performance and financial modeling, check that out. University of Miami, if you want to go back to school, has a real estate program. But if you don't want to spend money, you can always volunteer too, right? So link up with a nonprofit that's already doing work, volunteer your time, and you're going to learn just kind of by osmosis, being there, being on the site, finding out what they're doing, asking questions. But there's certainly other ways that you can partner with nonprofits as well. And, you know, I know there's some of you starting out just wanting to do something like this and doing your research and educating yourself. But there's some of you that might already have property. You know, maybe it's been in your family a long time. Maybe it's underutilized. Maybe the zoning's increased, right? And you know you can do more there. Don't feel like you have to go at it alone. You heard a little bit like looking for a partner. Pick somebody that's been through this before, because they're probably smarter than me and they won't make the same mistake twice. Or even look at partnering with a group like the Community Land Trust. It could be in a lot of different ways. we found a group in Hollandale that had a family-owned property. Her dad had built the property. It was 70 years old. She inherited it. She wanted to retire. She wanted to get paid so she could enjoy the good life, right? She could go on a cruise. But she also had families that had lived there for 20 years, 30 years. One of the women had had a family member live there since it had been built. She had had multiple cousins, both her daughters had lived there. And they didn't want a group that would come in and increase the rent, right? That's a perfect opportunity to look for a nonprofit like the South Florida Community Land Trust, where, you know, maybe you could sell or maybe you could partner to do something. We also actually had partnered with the Haitian American CDC. They had a piece of land just around the corner right here in Little Haiti. We ended up purchasing the property from them, but partnered with them to do community engagement. And we're getting ready to build 13 townhouses that I'm really excited about. They're going to be priced for households earning anywhere from that, I'm going to use that AMI number again, anywhere from 60% to 120% of the area median income.
And what is that in income, so they know?
Oh, I don't remember.
Yeah,
I don't remember.
It's probably in the 50s.
It is
high 50s.
advertised. If you search City of Miami area median income, it will pop up with a chart, and you can look at the percent area median income, and then you look at the household size, and that's how you find it. But the houses, the units are going to be a mix of 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms, priced from the high 200s to 300,000, and we're hoping to break ground in the next 2 months on that. It could not have been done, and I'm going to give you a plug here, Joanne, without the support of the Little Haiti Revitalization Trust. One of the pain points that I've been through, other developers have been through, is you start the project, construction costs are X, and then construction costs go up while you're planning it, you're doing the design work, you've submitted for permitting. A couple years later, you go back, and now construction costs are Y, and you've got a big gap.
Wow.
So we were very fortunate to have the trust fill that final gap with a generous $750,000 donation that's being used to make sure that we can still price those homes in the $200,000, $300,000 range to reach the people that are actually living and working in this community. But there's other ways to partner too, right? In both those instances I shared, where there was a seller that wanted to sell but still wanted to do good in the community, but there certainly could be a partnership, a joint venture with our group, with other experienced developers. Sometimes you could use our model where you own the land still and do a land lease. Sometimes you can form a company together and you guys are joint venture partners and you have a different fee split and a different percentage of what you're investing and what you're earning on the back end. But I think that's a really good strategy to consider, because you're sharing the risk with someone else if this is your first time developing, and you're getting their experience and you're learning on the job with them. It's almost like, what are those programs that you have, like when you're first learning to do, like a construction trade program, right? Where you're learning on the job, right? So I would not hesitate to look at a partnership or a joint venture where you can gain their experience while you're building the project.
Yeah. And listen, I would hands down, if you have never done a development project before, find a partner. Find a partner or find a great GC who can partner in the deal with you. Get someone with experience. And listen, I'll even tell you from personal experience, right, as a banker. I mean, been a banker, been doing this 15 years, and I look at the numbers look great. Well, I've gone out and done my own personal projects, and I probably have 2 right now that are like 6 figures in cost overruns, and I'm eating it right now because of it. So I would encourage all of you to find a partner, work with someone like a community land trust, find a Miami Homes for All who can give you advice, and then we take it to my man Darren. So Darren, I want you to talk about, now they've gone through this diligence process, they've gone to the community land trust, they got partners. Now, at what stage are they coming to talk to you? To talk about numbers, to talk about getting this thing off the ground, talking about building, and then talk about some of the pitfalls and challenges along the way, and things change.
Wow, a lot of information out here tonight, man. I'm intrigued in so many levels. Yesterday's prices is not today's prices. Okay, let's just be clear on that one. Also, too, oh God, the most important thing for me is my estimator, which is me, right? Because I'm putting numbers together that they're going to believe, right? I know what rebar costs. I know what concrete costs. I know what labor is. I know all this. I know what certain setbacks that may occur. So I had to, early on in my career, I didn't have a fail-safe, if you know what that means. That means that I was like, okay, let me just do this project. Let me put a number on it. And the number tells me that, hey, you can't go below 10. Don't do 950. Okay? I had to get over that. Now, I've been in 24 years. I learned from my mistakes. So what happened is with contractors, you have to have a fail-safe estimating system that when you put those numbers in, and you put in for your contingencies, you put into your general conditions, all those things play an important part. Now, being a smaller contractor, there's some overhead that I may not have with the bigger companies, okay? I'm not in a tower, okay? I don't have 30 trucks, you know what I'm saying? So there's certain costs on that end that can play a part in doing a project, right? So the things that I have done in the past when I sit down and I am selected. Now, you remember when I said earlier, I'm like third in line. All they were telling, I'm not really a part of. I mean, they were talking about all kinds of grants and, you know, help and this and stuff. But now they have all that together and they saying, here are the drawings, here are the plans, here are the blueprints. I need you to give me a price on it. So at that point, I'm assembling my team, okay, with me being a GC, and that team can comprise of maybe from 10 to 15 to 20 other subcontractors that's going to be under my umbrella and my responsibility if I'm awarded this job. So you can only imagine how much trust I got to have in those subs, right? So if my electrician comes out and he or she looks at these plans and these drawings and they say, okay, this is $100,000 to do this project, I'm sort of using that number. Now, what if we get into the job and that same contractor comes to me and say, oops, I didn't see this, and it's going to cost $20,000. It's a problem. You see what I'm saying right here? Now, to come back, the man and say, hey, you want a cup of coffee?
It wasn't unforeseen.
Right, exactly.
How expensive is that cup of coffee?
It's not gonna be pleasant. Let me put it that way. Somebody has to eat that. Somebody has to come there. Now, what I try to do is have a contingency in things of that nature, even for a job like that, and I disclose that contingency. So if something happens, then we know to pull from whatever that is. I don't like that too often. And sometimes contractors may do it on purpose so they can change order you to death, because it's hard for a contractor, once a contractor starts a project, it's hard for another contractor to come in to take over, because what you're saying is that I'm going to take over and I'm going to be responsible for everything that this previous contractor has done. Wow. You don't want it to get
and not just everything, every mistake.
Every mistake. You really don't want it to get to that point. Okay? You really don't. So if I can just, sum it and put it in some kind of summation, is for me as a contractor, outside of my subs and outside of my team, the estimating is the most important part for me as a general contractor. I have to make sure my costs, even if we have a trailer, I got to know how long I'm going to keep that trailer. If I give them a time frame of, let's say, 16 months to do a project, and I have my project manager and superintendent in my general conditions for that, and for whatever reason, this is say for 16 months we done had perfect weather. Perfect weather, no hurricanes, nothing. But this job goes into the 17th month, the 18th month, the 19th month. I got to pay, not including the cost or the penalties that I didn't deliver a job in 16 months.
Oh, wow.
Okay? As a contractor, that does happen. Okay? Liquidated damages. And liquidated damages can run you sometimes as $1,000 a day.
Oh, wow. Contingency. Yikes.
Okay? So in 30 days, if you haven't delivered and you haven't, that's 30 grand,
Oh.
60 grand, 90 grand. Seen it happen.
Oh, boy.
Okay? So those are some of the pitfalls. And I can just, since we're being candid here, okay? One of the things that the mistakes that when I put a budget in for a project, I don't budget for mistakes. I don't calculate that for mistakes. And I have had some mistakes that I have to go and say, wow, I have to fix that. I have to make it right. That's coming out of my pocket. That's coming out of my bottom line, not theirs, mine. Okay? So those are kind of things that I have to be really on top if you're a general contractor and you're dealing with developers. And I tell anybody out here, if you're looking for a general contractor, do your research. Make sure they have done similar projects that you're seeking out. And most importantly, this is very important, make sure you're speaking to the qualifier. And what I mean by that, for example, my company is Darmac Builders. I'm the qualifier. You may get somebody to say, I'm a contractor, but they're not the qualifier. They work for a contractor, or somebody can probably pull a permit for them. You don't want that. I'm sorry, if anybody here now offended, sorry. But if you're dealing with real dollars and you have a chance to lose, you want the person who's going to be accountable for on that job or be as responsible for it.
Got it.
Okay? That's very important. You don't want nobody to say, hey, I can get it, and then you be like, well, I thought you was the contractor. No, that's John. Well, who is John? Right? Don't get caught up in that. All right? So when you're looking for a contractor, see about similar projects. Make sure he or she can do the project. Find out how long they've been in business. If it's a bondable project, that's another issue. If they can get bonded. So you're dealing with money here that is really not yours. You're borrowing it. That means payback. Okay? So just keep that in mind. That's my kind of like synopsis on my positive and negative as a contractor.
Beautiful. Now go ahead, Mandy. If you got something to add, please do.
You mentioned contingency, and for those that are new to development, I wanted to mention that your contractor is going to carry a contingency, right, for the mistakes that they may have made in the bidding, or maybe they had a really good price from an electrician, but that electrician wasn't available when it started, and the next price was higher. So you've got your contractor's contingency. But if you're the developer, you need to carry your own contingency as well.
Oh, wow.
So you've got your soft cost contingency, right? So that's maybe for architectural work. Let's say you go and design something, you're ready to go, and you have to go back and redo something because you're over budget. Now you're going to have to pay redesign fees to do the value engineering to redesign it back on budget, right? So you have your soft cost contingency. Then you have your hard cost contingency. And just because your contractor's carrying one doesn't mean you don't need to carry your own too, right?
Oh,
What do you see on projects? So I know on our rehab projects, we budget a healthy contingency because you don't know what's behind the wall. And I can tell you, on the project we're renovating now, there was the scariest termite nest that I have ever seen behind the wall, to the point I don't know how that wall was holding up the roof, right? It looked like a piece of art.
Wow.
Right? But we had to reframe everything, reframe the entire wall, reframe the trusses on the roof, right? So 20% contingency when you're renovating.
Minimum, I typically see 15, 20%
Yeah.
contingency, at least. And so I know, Joanne, I know we're pressed for time, so I want to start the wrap, but I do want to get to the question, but I want to tie all this together to say that all of the things they mentioned are so important, because when it comes to me and I start to look at the finance package and the developer presents me with their model, and I'm going through every tab of that model, and I'm looking at their sources and uses, and I'm looking at their development budget, and I'm looking at what that amortization schedule is going to look like, and I'm looking at essentially how I'm going to finance this deal and how much money I'm going to give them. But most importantly, I'm looking at how I'm going to be repaid, right? So if they start to have cost overruns and budget issues, well, at the end of the day, you can only charge so much in the rent, right? Because then people in here are going to say, well, man, the rent's too dang on high. Well, that's where you start to run the parallels of being able to generate the income in order to support paying the monthly mortgage on the loan. And that's why it's important, because you can't just say, oh, yeah, we got it in the budget. It's okay. It'll be okay, but it's an overrun, and we'll work it on the back end when the financing comes and just ask for more money. Because at the end of the day, I'm only going to be able to lend you so much money based on the repayment ability. And that's why that's so critically important. So, I don't know, Joan, we have time for a couple questions. You want to take a couple, or how are we doing?
I think we can take like one and then kind of wrap up.
Okay.
I've
All right,
got
that
the
sounds good. So
mic.
we said we had one, or you got the mic? Okay, go ahead.
Really quick question for you. The program in September, how many slots do you have, and is it very competitive?
Yeah, so we're just getting started with the Funders Collaborative, which is starting in September. We're going to be doing, when it starts rolling out, it'll be 2 to 3 folks, 2 to 3 developers come in each month to present. So, I mean, yes, it'll be competitive the first couple months, right? But as we keep it moving, like there will be slots, and we want people to apply. We just want to make sure that you're at a place, right, that you're ready to present in front of these funders, right? So reach out beforehand. Like if you're thinking even a super early stage, like just thinking about development, reach out. Like we'll figure out where you're at in the process, and we'll figure out, okay, maybe we need a few more months before we can go to this group and get that final funding. Maybe we have to do some of the work in between. So reach out early, right? And I'll be honest with you, like, okay, like in September, maybe there's not a chance, but maybe in November or December next year.
Got it.
Right? We'll have that conversation.
Thank you.
Beautiful. Well, folks, first and foremost, I want to give a big thank you to Joanne and the Little Haiti Revitalization Trust for having us here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to thank each and every one of you for being here tonight. As you know, the Little Haiti Revitalization Trust, we're dedicated to uplifting our community, but definitely we're not in the role of being a developer. We want to provide resources like this informational session, like the dollars that we provided to the South Florida Community Land Trust. As we work on our strategic plan, we're really focused on our theme of buy back the block, and we want to encourage reinvestment, encourage people to come back and be part of the development like you talked about, right? Because it's happening. We see gentrification is happening. We see projects coming. We, as a trust, we're developed from the Magic City development. We see Sorlo coming down, and we know that our neighborhood is changing. So it's important to us to be able to be involved by providing the resources. We're thinking of joining this funders collaborative with Miami Homes for All so that we can provide support to the developers that are here in Little Haiti. So thank you everyone for coming out tonight. Watch this on YouTube, all the information so that you can refer to it and everything that we've given. Thank you so much, each and every one of you.
Thank you.
Gain pitié pour moi, petit chéri. Depuis 300 ma fille, qu'on aimerait ou refuser accepter moi. Oh, elle n'aime pas qu'on est chéri. Qui ça m'en fait encore? Tiens, amour, m'accepte toute condition. Sans demander moins d'accord, fais-moi grâce. Ou t'as une petite patience pour l'enfin communier. Waiton, juste l'enfin confirmé. Ou madame pour sa menteur, si réellement vraiment. En vérité, chérie, prends-toi comme témoin. A tout chéri, c'est roule d'amour. Longtemps, c'est roule vraiment. Acceptez-moi pour moi, pas fou.